Howdy, my totally is always tubular gamers, and guess what? We're back with another ranking video, and it's going to be on another driving series. Today, we're going to be looking at the Burnout series. This was actually requested, but I finally played through all the Burnout games, so here we are. We're going to rank them worst to best. Now, the Burnout series has gone down as one of the very best racing game series in gaming, and is a legendary series at this point. Developed by Criterion Games, it had a simple enough start on the PS2. It was just a little arcade racer. There wasn't all that much to it. It was pretty budget. However, after a couple years and a couple games, Burnout really evolved into this crazy arcade racer. Once Criterion were bought out by EA, it really blew the lid off the series. It became all about destroying other cars. It had crazy music. It got even faster and even more insane, and it just kept getting better and better. The later Burnout games were incredibly well received. People loved their fast speed, the amount of different takedowns you could do on the vehicles, the soundtrack, how much content was in them. People just loved the Burnout games. And you know, I see tons of people talking about nowadays, if they're going to talk about racing games, a lot of them immediately go to Burnout, and for good reason. However, after the late 2000s, Burnout just kind of disappeared, bar one weird spin-off and a remaster. It's basically been dormant since 2008. EA would move Criterion to the Need for Speed series and eventually as a support studio for their other games, which is where they currently are still, and a number of Criterion's original members left and made their own studio to go on to make their own driving games. But either way, it seems Burnout really was left in the dust of the 2000s, and a lot of people have been clamoring for the series to come back in some way, shape, or form, and while I personally am not too sure how a modern Burnout game would look, we can absolutely agree that the original games are amazing. I have always been a really big Burnout fan. I've just fallen in love with the series from the moment I even tried it. I actually started with Paradise back when it came out on the 360 well over a decade ago. Played it, thought it was amazing, and went back and played all the other games. And so yeah, I have a lot of good memories with some of these games. However, I will say there were a couple games that I had never even heard of in the Burnout series until I was making this list. Some weird spin-offs that I don't think most people have even heard of either. And so it was really interesting to go back and try all of these games, and now here I am ready to rank them all for you. We're going to be looking at everything. How fast is the game? How great's the gameplay? How's the music? How's the controls? How's the physics? We're looking at everything here. And of course, this is my opinion. Burnout is a very beloved series. I'm sure everyone has their own unique list. So let me know down below why you think yours is correct and why mine is wrong. And what your favorite Burnout games are. Like, share, sub, comment, all that good stuff. Let's just get right into it. What do I think is the worst of the Burnout games? I think the worst of the Burnout games is sadly the newest Burnout game, Burnout Crash, released in 2011 for the PS3, 360, and iPhone. Now, Burnout Crash is pretty different from every other Burnout game. It's not even a racing game at all. See, they took the really popular Crash mode from some of the Burnout games and tried to make it its own game to mild success. If you've played the Crash modes in the games, you'll understand this immediately. It's actually played from a bird's eye perspective, but it's still the same. You drive into an intersection with your car and try to cause as much havoc as possible. There's a number of intersections in this game, and you can drive a couple different vehicles, but really, all you're doing is you're driving into that intersection and trying to cause as much destruction as possible, whether you're smashing into other cars, whether you're blowing up, whether you're destroying other stuff. I mean, you're really just trying to cause as much destruction as possible. And you know, I won't lie, it's fun to drive into traffic and just get completely destroyed and mauled by the other cars and blow up. It's fun. I mean, the Crash mode and all the other Burnout games were really fun too. There's no bad Crash mode, this game included. So why is this game at the very bottom of the list? Well, when you compare all the other Burnout games, yeah, this game's a bit shallow. I mean, the Crash mode is fantastic in Burnout, but the Crash mode has never been the main course. It's usually been like a side dish here, you know, like some mashed potatoes or mac and cheese. No, here, it's the main course. This is the whole game, and, you know, it's fun for a little bit, but eventually it does kind of get old, especially when there's only like 5 or 6 intersections in this game, and doing them over and over and over, it does get old. On top of that, you will have seen all the intersections in like an hour or two, and then you'll be totally done with the game within, I don't know, 3-4 hours, maybe 5 at most. If you're taking your time, you want to get some high scores on the leaderboard. Yeah, there's just not a lot of depth here. Now, I still think a Burnout game that is just Crash mode is still viable. I think it just needs to be done a bit better than this. It needs to have the depth that the main games have and not from a bird's eye perspective, and just have a lot more to it. It's a shame this is the last Burnout game. While I wouldn't say it's a bad game, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I'd say just go to any of the other Burnout games and play those Crash modes because there's a lot more depth, there's a lot more to them, and they're just better times. And so here we have the original Burnout, developed by Criterion and put out by Acclaim in 2001 and 2002. Now, the original Burnout, most people have never played this game, and after buying it and sitting down and playing this game before this video, yeah, they're not really missing much. I think the best thing I can say about this game is you can really see how far the series has come when you play the original game. This original game feels like an incredibly budget title. Like, it just feels really budget, like $20 it released in the early 2000s budget. But despite that, I think you can still have a pretty decent time with it, and it's a fun little arcade racer experience. It's definitely the most arcade feeling Burnout game of them all, with a very strict timer, the way the cars control, which is alright, and the way that the game generally looks. Again, it is budget, so it doesn't look amazing, but it just gives off those arcade vibes. Like I said, the handling and general drifting in the game is pretty decent. It is very arcade, and it's different from the other Burnout games. If you come to this game after playing like Burnout 3 or anything on, it's going to feel very weird. The game is a lot less about the racing actually, and the game is a lot more about just dodging the traffic, especially because at most you'll only ever have 3 opponents. And speaking of those opponents, the rubber banding in this game is absolutely atrocious. One of the worst examples I've ever seen. They will always, and I mean always, catch up to you. It doesn't matter how fast or slow you're going, they will always be near you. Now, the whole series is full of terrible rubber banding, but this game really is the worst. Another annoying point to this game is how cars crash off everything in this game. You get wrecked incredibly easy. It can really be frustrating how easy you get wrecked. Like, again, if you've played any Burnout game after this game and you come back to this, it will be very jarring with how easily your car just gets completely destroyed. You actually have to alter your playstyle and sometimes even have to drive either really defensively or just slower so you don't crash a bunch of times and run out of time and lose the race, which did happen to me. And you're not going to be getting really any help from the boosting either, because boosting sucks in this game. You need to fill up the meter completely, and to fill that up you need to get near misses. To get near misses, you have to be stupid close to the car, like way more than any other game. The window for success is tiny here. It's actually hard to fill up the boost, and of course if you crash you lose almost all of it, so good luck to you there. Now, there isn't a ton of courses in this game. I think they're decently enough designed, but there just really isn't a lot here. You'll end up playing the same ones over and over, a certain section from one over and over, and it does honestly get a bit repetitive. Hey, at least the music's actually pretty decent. It gives off those arcade vibes I was talking about earlier. Now, Burnout 1 is okay at best. It's really not a great racing game. Coming back is kind of difficult, and trust me, if you've played any other Burnout game, you're not going to really like this very much. It just feels way too limited, and the formula has just been improved so many times over that I really can't recommend you try this. It's a good, interesting footnote, and it's cool to see where the series started, but it's just not worth it to come back to it. And so here we have Burnout Legends, released for the PSP in 2005 by Criterion. It was ported to the DS though a little bit later by Visual Impact. I'll be talking exclusively about the PSP version here, as I've heard pretty terrible things about the DS port. So Burnout Legends really is Burnout on the go. Not only is it on the go, it's basically a remix of Burnout 2 and 3. It takes everything from those two games and just kind of slams them together. All the cars, all the courses, all the game modes from both games, they're all here. And it is impressive how uncompromised this experience is. You really still are getting a Burnout experience. Obviously, it doesn't look as good and it doesn't feel as fast, but the action is still absolutely there. You still race just as many cars. The tracks are not compromised. You race the full track. Like I said, all the game modes are here. There's a ton of vehicles in this game. All the cars are here. All of the crash mode from Burnout 3, it's all here. And again, it really is impressive how uncompromised this version is. Unfortunately, it doesn't add anything new. It's just Burnout 2 and 3 here, basically. But if you were looking to play Burnout in the 2000s on the go, this was a great alternative. Nowadays, Burnout Paradise is on the Switch, and I'd much rather recommend that than this. And so here we have Burnout Dominator, probably the most forgotten of the Burnout games, developed by EA UK and put out by EA in 2007 for the PS2 and PSP. This is the only Burnout game not developed by Criterion. Now, Dominator came out in between Revenge and Paradise, and those two games have basically completely encompassed this game, and everybody's forgotten about this game. I don't think most people have played Burnout Dominator, and to be honest with you, you're really not missing all that much. Burnout Dominator is very similar to Burnout 3. It features that really high-octane, just fast arcade racing experience that you're going to get with a Burnout game. It features your car driving through tracks as fast as possible, boosting, avoiding other cars, taking down your opponents so you win the race. and the other game modes you've come to expect at this point, like the Road Rage game mode, the Eliminator, Burning Lab, Maniac mode, Drifting Challenge, Near Miss Challenge, Burnout Challenge, and of course Grand Prix. Now if you were paying any attention right there, you'll notice a game mode was missing, a very important game mode to Burnout, Crash mode. Yeah, this is the only Burnout game aside from the original to not feature any kind of crash mode at all, which is a very strange, confusing, and bad omission. And I think that it's sorely missed. It really does add to the experience. Speaking of sorely missed, all the cool stuff from Burnout Revenge isn't here, like traffic checking and all the challenges that came from that, including their crash mode. And this game's main focus is the return of Burnouts. Now, Burnouts had not been seen since Burnout 2, where you go through all your boost in one go and you actually get a bunch of it back if you go through it in one go. And you know, I think that's pretty fun, but I'll be real, when you compare this to traffic checking, it's not even close. I'd rather have the traffic checking. At least when it comes to the vehicle selection, it is mostly new. There's a few returning cars here, but for the most part it is new, and I think there are plenty of good cars here. When it comes to the tracks, they're pretty much all new. I wouldn't say they're as memorable as, say, 3 or Revenges, but they're pretty decent here. There's nothing really bad. And you know, I wouldn't really say there's anything all that bad about Burnout Dominator. The AI are just aggressive as hell. This is one of the most difficult Burnout games for sure. The music is nice, the game looks fine enough. There's, again, nothing all that bad. The thing is, though, it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, been there, done that a few times now, and it was done way better. This gameplay formula really has been done better in other Burnout games, and the omission of crash mode really is kind of crushing. It's a situation of like, been there, done that, and it was done better before, where it's like, this game doesn't do anything inherently wrong, but the other Burnout games really are just that much better, and I'd recommend those in a heartbeat over this game. This game, it was kind of forgotten for a reason. It doesn't really do all that much. I mean, it's a good game, and it's a fun driving game on PS2, but other than that, I wouldn't really say there's much else to it. Alright, and so here we got Burnout 2 Point of Impact, developed by Criterion and put out by Acclaim in 2002 and 3. After this, the series would be put out by EA. Now, Burnout 2 is actually a pretty decent improvement on that original game. They really looked at that original game's formula and tried to improve it in just about every single way they could, and it feels a lot more in line with later Burnout games. The game is still absolutely a budget racing game, though. From its visuals to its music and just general feel, it still is a budget arcade racer. And don't get it twisted, I don't think it's bad at all. I think it actually adds some charm to this game and gives it a little bit of a personality that the other games don't even have. Not even the first game, because this game is way better than the first game. It is much faster and generally controls a lot better. The handling on the cars is way better. They don't crash from the slightest bump anymore, and it is a lot more forgiving with the time limit. The AI is nowhere near as aggressive and rubber bandy as that original game. They're not going to somehow catch you when you're 10 seconds ahead of them. The boost is way better in this game. Getting near misses isn't stupidly difficult. You can go into the air also to get boost. The game, again, just feels a lot faster. It's a lot more fun. The tracks are a lot better designed. There's more of them. There's a lot more cars here. And this game really does have an aggressive personality. For instance, there's music that plays in the game. It still is pretty budget music, nothing special. It's not licensed like the later games, and it's fine enough. But when you start boosting in this game, the music gets really loud, it gets really fast, it gets, again, very aggressive. They really do want you to drive like a madman. And you know, they knew what they were going for here, because the more you drive like a madman, the faster you'll end up going. There's a very Need for Speed hot pursuit mode where you actually are a cop and you have to wreck an escaping criminal's car to arrest him, and you actually unlock other cars through this way. And then this was the game that introduced crash mode, where you have to just cause as much destruction as possible. You'll drive into an intersection and just try to total as many cars as possible. It's very, very basic here, especially compared to later games, but the foundation was laid here for a very aggressive series. And all of this comes together to make Burnout 2 a very fun, good racing game. I think it's a great arcade racer for the time. I think it is actually still worth playing even nowadays. You can come back to this game if you played the later games and still have a good time. It's not going to start out as crazy as the other games, but it does eventually get there. And I think once it ramps up, it is a really fun time that is worth playing. Alright, we're just in goated territory now at this point. I know some people aren't going to agree with me here, but I have Burnout 3, developed by Criterion and put out by EA in 2004. Now, Burnout 3 really just turned the whole series on its head, and racing games in general on its head. Remember that really aggressive attitude I was talking about with Burnout 2? Well, imagine that times like 3 or 4 for Burnout 3 Takedown. This game has one of the most aggressive attitudes you'll ever find in a game. Like, this game is off the walls crazy. This game would really set the standard for the Burnout series. This is one of the most fast-paced arcade racing games to ever release. The game does bring back a lot of the elements from Burnout 2, only really just accentuates them, like Boost for instance. Boost was in Burnout 2, you could get some decent speed with it and the music would ramp up. No, this game just is absolutely crazy with its boost. You go way faster with the boost, you're getting way more boost, you get boost through risky driving, and you rapidly are increasing a car's speed as fast as you can. The new mechanic that Burnout 3 brings to the table is in the title. Takedowns. It's all about taking down your opponents, smashing into them as hard as you can, smashing them up against walls, rear-ending them like crazy. You want to take these other drivers out or you're not going to win the race. You get boost for taking them out, your boost meter extends when you take people out, and you're just going really fast in this game. Like, this game is just an absolute white-knuckle experience. They really just crank Burnout 2's gameplay up to 11 or 12 here to make it just an insane experience. This game has one of the best senses of speed you will ever find in a video game. And then there's the actual progression of the game. So instead of before where it's just kind of a list of events, you actually go around the world in this game. It's like a world tour and you get medals, rankings, and a ton of unlockables. This game has a ton of variety. You aren't just racing the whole time in this game. There's a bunch of other game modes. One of the better modes here is Road Rage, where you gotta get as many takedowns as possible. It's as simple as that. Take out as many opponents as you can. It's very fun. There's other game modes here like Burning Lap, where it's kind of like a time trial and you just got to get through the course as fast as possible. There's Face Off, where it's 1v1, and there's Eliminator, where it's a 5-lap race and last place gets eliminated every lap. Not the most innovative, but still very fun here. But then the best mode in this game that isn't racing has got to be Crash Mode. They took the Crash Mode from Burnout 2 and really just amplified it up like crazy. You are just destroying as much as possible. It honestly feels a bit like a puzzle game now, as you really got to angle where the car is going to go. You got to figure out the best spot to crash so you destroy as much as possible. And the Crash Mode in this game is just super fun. And with all this together, this game has an absolute ass ton of content. There's over 170 events in this game with a ton of variety. There's a ton of different courses. Sure, you'll go through the same ones a number of times, but this game still has a ton of courses. There are dozens of vehicles, and a lot of them control differently. This game just has a lot going for it, much more so than most racing games released nowadays. And then this game's presentation is just absolutely fantastic. This is one of those rare instances where EA actually taking over a series is for the better. That budget feel completely gone. The game looks and plays amazing. The frame rate's fantastic, and then the soundtrack is just legendary. It is perfect for this kind of game. It is just absolutely amazing. This game is one of my favorite racing games of all time. It's one of the best arcade racers ever. It's one of the best racing games of the 2000s. It's just one of the best games like of all time, and it's number 3 on this list. Why is that? Well, I just like the other two a little bit more, but this game is 110% worth playing. It is a fantastic time. And so here we have Burnout Paradise, developed by Criterion and put out by EA in 2008 originally. Burnout Paradise took the Burnout formula from 3 and Revenge and just put it into an open world of all things. Now I know this game doesn't get the same love that Burnout 3 and Revenge get, but this was the first Burnout game I played. I played it pretty much when it came out on PC, and I remember just being absolutely hooked. I was amazed by this game. I was really just blown away, and I have much more time in Paradise than any of the other Burnout games. And so maybe it's just my fun memories that get it up here, but it was really hard to not pick Burnout Paradise as the best Burnout game. I just really do love this game to death. It takes place in the fictional city of Paradise City, a fully explorable open world and where players can compete in several types of races or events. Every single intersection in this game is an event, which I think is just an amazing way to spread all the events out. It's not like a list, you got to go to the intersection. I really like that. This game has a ton of personality to it. There's collectibles, there's literally hundreds of shortcuts. There's dozens upon dozens of vehicles to unlock and race in, and then this was the first Burnout for me where I got really invested in the online mode. Now Burnout 3 and Revenge do have online modes, well they did, but Burnout Paradise was the first one where I actually played it a bunch, got really into it, and have had just so much fun with the online. Whether it's exploring around the open world or competing in races, the online mode was really something to behold in this game. Oh yeah, and then the actual gameplay, if you couldn't tell, is very similar to Burnout 3 and Revenge. It's still incredibly fast paced. You go like stupidly fast in this game. You drift around corners with insane speed. There's still the takedowns. You still have the really awesome boosts. You can do burnouts again. and almost all the game modes from the previous couple games return. Sadly, crash mode is not in this game. They instead of this new mode called Showtime, which you can activate literally at any time you want in the game, but there's not really anything to do with it. Like, there's no game modes based around it, and you can do it in a race, but it's not really going to do much, so that is a disappointment. But at least it's not totally gone like Dominator, but the core gameplay is so great that you won't miss it that much. The damage system is also different from other Burnout games. In every other Burnout game, if you crash, you gotta respawn. But here, if you crash, but it's not the worst crash, you can actually get a drive away where you do drive away and you're okay and you don't have to respawn, which is a very nice touch, and it shows we've come really a long way from that original game. Now, despite being an open world, the attention to detail is still absolutely there, and the general level design is just as good as the other Burnout games. There is so much to this open world. In lots of racing games with open worlds, you still really do go on a track, and usually there's big arrows like Need for Speed Underground telling you where to go. In Burnout Paradise, you can get to the finish line pretty much any way you want. If you think you know a faster route than what the game recommends, you can take it, and it might be faster, it might not, but it's up to you to find out. There's tons of shortcuts, there's gas stations all over so that you can fill your boost. Like, this open world is living, breathing, has a ton going on, and it doesn't feel anywhere near as lifeless as some other open worlds. Saints Row. And it really has become one of my favorite open world maps like ever. I still do know it like the back of my hand. I really just love it, and I think if most open worlds were made half as decent as this one even nowadays, the Loch Ness Monster would have got my 350. But you know, it's just a great time, and I think nothing was compromised with the general gameplay of Burnout by making it open world. I really do think it enhances the experience. I know, again, some people don't love it as much as 3 and Takedown, and that's fine. I just really got really addicted to this game, especially when I first started playing. I just could not put it down. This soundtrack, major banger. It slaps. It definitely gets laid. I love the soundtrack to this game, whether it's the main theme of Paradise City or any of the other music. It's just amazing. It is superb. Everything comes together to create one of my favorite experiences I've ever had with a video game. Genuinely, it is just so good. I was there from almost day one, and I remember playing this game the last day that the servers for the original version were online. Nowadays, it's been remastered, and it's on even the Switch, so you can play it portably. I guess that gets it some bonus points. It is the only one that is available on modern consoles. And if you claim to like driving or racing games and you haven't played Burnout Paradise, especially now that it's on modern consoles, all I really got to say to you is, poser, what are you doing? Go play it, man. Absolutely, go play it. It's totally worth it. And here we have, in my opinion, one of the greatest games of all time, Burnout Revenge, developed by Criterion and put out by EA in 2005 and 6. Burnout Revenge really looked at Burnout 3 and said, how do we make it even crazier? We already had the crazy at 11. What do we even do? And what they did, they put Burnout 3 on crack. It probably wasn't just crack either. Maybe it was heroin or shrooms or meth, or you know what? It was every drug they could find to put Burnout 3 on, and then we got Burnout Revenge. It's like Burnout 3, but even crazier. The core gameplay isn't all that different. It's incredibly fast. It's faster than even Burnout 3, with everything you know and love. The boosting, the takedowns, the shortcuts, the airtime, the near misses. It's all there, but now they've expanded the combat options. What do I mean by this? Traffic checks. Burnout Revenge really focuses on racing during rush hour traffic. Now, in earlier Burnout titles, if you rear end somebody who's going the same direction as you, usually you'll push the car out of the way, you'll slow down a bit, and then you'll keep going. Unless it's the original game, then you'll just crash. But not Burnout Revenge. They really encourage you to just rear end people as hard as you can. If you hit somebody going a different direction as you, you will crash. But slamming into people going the same direction, rear ending people, the traffic check as they call it, oh, it's so great in this game. You will send them flying. And not only will you send them flying, you basically turn them into a projectile. You can hit other traffic, causing even more chaos, or you can use it to hit opponents. You can slam pedestrian cars into your opponents that you're racing to take them down as well. This adds a whole nother layer to the game. It makes the racing even more frantic, even more fun. It makes it more like, honestly, a car combat game without the weapons. Instead, you're just using yourself as the weapon and slamming into other cars. It really makes for an enjoyable experience. I love this edition. It is in Burnout Paradise, but it's really not a focus of the game, and it's nowhere near as great as it is here. Here, it just is fantastic, and I think it really adds to the driving. The racing was already just amazing, like to begin with. The traffic check really just adds to it. And then we have the rest of the game. In terms of progression and playing through the game, it is very similar to Burnout 3. You do just tons upon tons of events and get your rankings and your medals. And unlike Burnout 3, it's not like a world event kind of thing. It's separated by license class. But you really are just going from event to event trying to get the best score possible or come in first. Whether you're racing, whether it's a burning lap, whether it's one of the new challenges based around the traffic check. I think all of these challenges are great. This game is it's just so much fun. There really is no bad game mode here, but you know the best mode that isn't racing. It's got to be the crash mode. Now, crash mode was great in Takedown, but in Burnout Revenge, the crash mode is just phenomenal. It is my favorite crash mode of the whole series. I have nothing but amazing things to say about it. There are a ton of scenarios. There's a ton of interesting scenarios. A lot of them are just straight up puzzles you have to figure out, and there is wind when you go off jumps, and I know some people don't like this, but I don't really care. I think it honestly adds a bit more to it. It makes it more engaging, and some last minute changes can be made, and sometimes the wind is good. It'll make a quick little adjustment and it'll make even more destruction. But you really just do cause so much chaos and destruction in Revenge, and I just think it's unparalleled. I think the crash mode is fantastic. It really does feel like a puzzle game at times, and I think it's just unrivaled by anything before or since. It's just a superb time, and I think that anybody who hasn't tried the crash mode alone should try the crash mode. I mean, it's pretty obvious that I recommend Burnout Revenge. I mean, this is just a fantastic video game. It is just amazing top to bottom. I love all the tracks. I love the racing. I love the handling. I love the cars. I love the crash mode, the game modes. This game is just amazing. I know I'm really sucking the game off at this point, but I just really, really love this game. I couldn't put it down the moment I started playing it. It's not perfect, of course. The AI is still about as rubber bandy as you'd expect from a Burnout game, especially in the one-on-one settings where they magically catch up to you, but this is one of the rare instances where I don't think it's that bad, especially in Burnout in general, because it makes the races a lot more exciting and you can just take them out again, but they will not mess around here. I think it was a little better than Burnout 3's at least. I also do really like the progression of this game. I think it is a little better than Burnout 3's, and I love the variety that's presented here. And then when it comes to the presentation, it's just top notch. The game looks amazing. It plays amazing. The frame rate's great. It's super smooth. Like, I have nothing to complain about the presentation. The soundtrack is just great. The soundtrack in 3 was amazing. It's probably about as good. It might be a little less, but it's still just fantastic. It sets the stage, and I'm really just gushing about this game. I need to stop talking about this game. You know, some people just have those games they can talk about forever. This is one of those games for me. Burnout Revenge is just a fantastic game. It absolutely should be played by anyone who likes driving games. Burnout 3, Revenge, and Paradise, I think, are just must-plays for anyone. Even if you don't like driving games, they're just must-plays. There's a reason people still fondly remember and talk about the Burnout series, because nothing has come even close since. Like, not even close. These games are just some of the best driving games, period. And are we ever going to get another Burnout game? I don't know, to be honest. Criterion Games is not what it used to be. After Burnout crashed, they actually went on to develop Need for Speed games, which is kind of where they're still at this point. I do know a number of Criterion employees split off to create a company called Three Fields Entertainment, and they've made some games like Dangerous Golf, which was fine enough, and Dangerous Driving, which I have not tried, so it's cool to see that they're at least kind of trying to bring Burnout back. I know a number of people have said, let's bring Burnout back, but to be honest, if it's not as good as 3 or Revenge or Paradise, I'd rather just keep the fun memories. I don't need to see EA butcher another series with a bunch of live service multiplayer garbage. I'd rather just stick to the original games, maybe re-release them. I think that would be good. But other than that, I just love Burnout. I love these old games. These games are just goated at this point. Play Burnout. Great series. That's it for this video. I've been going on way too long. Hope everyone has a good day, night. Comment cement if you made it to this part. See you later.